Section 1. The Forbidden Familiarity. I never thought my life would take such a turn. On paper, I was the image of stability, married to a man who provided, who came home every evening, who said he loved me. But behind the polite smiles and daily routines, there was a silence between us, a gap that kept growing. I didn't talk about it. I didn't even let myself think about it too much, until he arrived. My stepbrother. It wasn't like I didn't know him. We'd met a few times during family gatherings. But this time was different. He was staying with us for a few months while sorting out work in the city. I remember the first moment he walked through the door. His voice was deeper than I remembered, his smile easy and warm. And I hated how quickly I noticed the way he filled the doorway, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the rain outside. From the start, our conversations flowed effortlessly. At dinner, he'd ask about my day, and I'd find myself laughing at his stories, the kind of laugh that made my cheeks ache, a laugh I hadn't shared with my husband in months. It was harmless, wasn't it? At least, that's what I kept telling myself. One evening, my husband was working late, and my stepbrother and I ended up in the kitchen together. We talked about childhood memories, about little embarrassments from family gatherings. He leaned against the counter, sipping tea, eyes fixed on mine when I spoke. And in that stillness, I felt something shift. Not in him, but in me. A dangerous awareness. Later that week, the house was quiet after midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I made myself some warm milk in the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, shirt loose, hair slightly messy, and asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was fine, but my pulse betrayed me. We ended up sitting at the table, talking in hushed voices, as though we were sharing a secret from the rest of the world. I noticed the way his gaze lingered, the way his hand brushed mine when he passed me the sugar. It was quick, accidental, or maybe not. It made me inhale sharply, my body reacting before my mind could form a thought. When I finally went upstairs, I told myself it was nothing. He was family, by marriage. It was late. We were just tired. But that night, lying beside my husband's sleeping form, my thoughts didn't stay where they should. They wandered back to the kitchen, to the flicker of candlelight on his face, to the way his voice dropped lower when he told me goodnight. And for the first time, I caught myself wondering, what would happen if I didn't stop this? If you want, I can move on to section 2 and push the temptation toward the first real physical crossing of the line. Would you like me to continue? Section 2. Crossing the line. It happened on a rainy afternoon. The sky outside was heavy, and the sound of water against the windows filled the silence of the house. My husband was away for the day, tied up with meetings. I had just made coffee when the lights flickered and went out. I stood there, holding the cup, the room dim except for the grey light coming through the kitchen window. Then I heard his footsteps. My stepbrother walked in, holding his phone, muttering about the power outage. His hair was damp from running in the rain, a single drop sliding down his jaw before disappearing under the collar of his shirt. We laughed about being trapped in the quiet together. He made some joke about survival skills, about how I'd need him if the storm lasted too long. His tone was teasing, but something about the way his eyes stayed on mine made my pulse quicken. We ended up sitting in the living room, the world outside muted by the storm. He pulled a blanket over his shoulders, and when I shivered, he lifted one side and motioned for me to join. It was innocent, at first. The kind of thing family might do. But as the minutes passed, the warmth between us became something else entirely. I could feel his arm close enough that the heat of his skin reached me. Our legs brushed once, then again. I told myself to move, but I didn't. He asked if I'd ever wanted to just disappear from my life for a while. The question caught me off guard. I asked him what he meant, and he shrugged, saying sometimes routines suffocate people. His words felt like they were meant for me, like he could see right through me. When I laughed nervously, he reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It was such a small gesture, yet it sent a jolt through me. I knew I should say something, pull away, create distance. Instead, I stayed still, my breath shallow, my mind spinning. The sound of rain seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding in my ears. His hand lingered just a second too long, his fingers brushing the side of my neck. I swallowed hard, and for a moment, We just looked at each other. There was no pretending anymore. And then it happened, a kiss. Soft, hesitant at first, like we were testing a boundary we both knew we were crossing. It lasted only a few seconds before we pulled back, eyes wide, hearts racing. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence between us said everything, that nothing would ever feel the same again. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it. The warmth of his lips, the scent of rain on his skin. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Section 3, The Point of No Return. The following weekend, the perfect storm of opportunity arrived. My husband was away on a business trip, not due back until late the next day. I told myself I'd spend the night catching up on a book, maybe watching an old movie. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. It was late when I heard his voice from the hallway. He'd been out earlier, and now he stood at the living room door with a casual smile, asking if I wanted to watch something with him. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I did. Too much. We sat side by side on the couch, a safe distance at first. The glow from the TV flickered across the room, shadows dancing over the walls. The film played, but I couldn't have told you what it was about. All my focus was on the space between us. Halfway through, he reached for the bowl of popcorn between us, his arm brushing mine. It should have been nothing, but it felt like everything. When I glanced at him, his eyes met mine and held them there. Slowly, he set the bowl aside. The air shifted. I felt it in the tightening of my chest, in the way my breath caught as he leaned in. There was no hesitation this time. When his lips touched mine, it was deeper, hungrier, as though the kiss we'd shared days ago had only been a promise, and this was the fulfillment. His hands cupped my face, then slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. I could feel the heat of him, the solid weight of his presence. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop, but I didn't. Somewhere, a voice in my head whispered my husband's name, but it was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears, by the way his fingertips traced the line of my jaw, down my arm, to my waist. The room seemed smaller, the world outside erased entirely. It was just us, and the pull between us that had been building for weeks. When we finally broke apart for air, neither of us moved away. Instead, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing heavily, as though even the smallest distance would hurt. The flicker of the TV cast a soft glow over his face, and I knew, whatever this was, whatever it meant, there was no undoing it now. We didn't speak. Words would have shattered the fragile, dangerous magic in the air. Instead, we let the silence hold us, letting our actions say what we couldn't. Later, alone in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, my skin still tingling where he'd touched me. I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And yet, I also knew I would do it again. If you want, I can finish with section 4, which will deliver the emotional aftermath, guilt, secrecy, and unresolved desire. That ending will make it hit even harder for your viewers. Here's section 4, 500 words. The aftermath, crafted to close the story with guilt, secrecy, and an unresolved pull, perfect for a faceless YouTube narration that leaves viewers hooked. Section 4. The next morning, the house felt different. It wasn't just the soft light spilling through the curtains or the faint scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen. It was the heaviness in the air. The unspoken truth. I found him there, leaning against the counter, phone in hand. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. It wasn't awkward. Not exactly. It was something else, something heavier, more dangerous. He asked if I wanted coffee. His tone was casual, but I caught the quick glance he gave me, the kind that carried the weight of last night in its silence. I said yes, but my voice was quieter than usual. When his hand brushed mine as he passed me the mug, it was like a spark through my skin, a reminder of everything we'd done and everything we couldn't speak of. The day passed in fragments. I found myself checking my phone more than usual, waiting for a message from him even though we were in the same house. Every sound in the hallway made me glance up. Every small movement, the way he stood too close in the kitchen, the way our eyes met when no one else was around, kept pulling me back into the memory of his lips, his touch. That evening, my husband called to say he'd be home in an hour. I felt a sudden wave of panic. Not because I feared he'd find out, at least, not yet, but because I didn't know how to look at him without betraying something in my eyes. When my husband walked through the door, smiling, asking how my day was, I forced myself to smile back. My answers were short, safe. Dinner was a blur. Across the table, my stepbrother ate quietly, barely looking up, but I could feel his presence like a current running under the surface of the room. Every time I caught the faintest whiff of his cologne, my stomach tightened. Later, when I was in bed beside my husband, staring at the dark ceiling, I replayed the last few days in my mind. I thought of the first glance, the lingering touches, the kiss, the night that had changed everything. And I knew something I couldn't say out loud. I didn't regret it. Not yet. The guilt was there, yes. But so was the craving. The knowledge that if the chance came again, I would take it, even if it meant breaking everything I'd built. As I lay there, my husband's slow breathing beside me, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside my door for just a moment, then moved on. And in that silence, I realized the most dangerous part wasn't what had already happened. It was knowing that it wasn't over.